Hi, and welcome to this month's guide. My name's Rebecca, and today I'll be taking you to Piemonte, or Piemonte, as they call it in the industry. This is a region that produces some of Italy's most famous and delicious wines. Piemonte is a region in northwest Italy that shares borders with France and Switzerland. Its name means at the foot of the hills, because that's exactly where it is. Piemonte is flanked on two sides by the Alps. In November 2012, the multi-millionaire rap star Jay-Z flew to Piemonte for a weekend and spent thousands of euros. What did he spend his money on? Their world-famous Alba White truffles. Because Piemonte is home to amazing foods as well as some amazing wines. Truffles, ravioli, gorgonzola, all come from Piemonte and are washed down with powerful red Barolos and sparkling white Astis. So are wines from this region very expensive? Well, they never used to be particularly expensive, no. But Barolo wine is getting more and more popular and can be as much as £300 a bottle now. What about production? Piemonte is Italy's largest producer of wine. In fact, it produces 60 million litres of Asti per year. That's enough to fill 24 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So how did this region, high up in the hills of northern Italy and flanked by mountains, come to be Italy's biggest wine producer? Well, believe it or not, the wine production here is actually woven into the very fabric of modern-day Italy. But to get to modern-day Italy, we need to go back to around 300 BC, when the ancient Greeks planted the first vines in Piemonte. It was then the Romans who arrived sometime around 100 BC who really cultivated the process, right up until the fall of the Roman Empire at the end of the 5th century. The next major event for Piemonte wine takes place in the 19th century at the end of the Middle Ages. During this period, Italy as we know it didn't exist at all, but was a collection of states and kingdoms. And in the north, Austria controlled the neighbouring state to Piemonte, Lombardy. When the Austrian government suddenly raised the taxes on importing Piemonte wine into Lombardy, the Piemontese wine industry risked being crippled, and the winemakers, who included famous generals like Giuseppe Garibaldi, revolted. And these revolts are one of the factors which sparked the Revolution of 1848, which led to the unification of Italy. So actually, winemaking is integral to the very foundations of modern Italy. But of course, there's far more to it than that. The geography of Piemonte is hugely important too. As you might have already guessed, especially if you enjoyed last month's guide on Mendoza, the fact that 40% of Piemonte is covered in mountains has a major impact on the terroir here. But how exactly? Well, fog is one reason. The morning fog, which gradually burns off during the day, helps keep the grapes cool and balanced in flavour. And another reason is the dry landscape. The Alps which border the region provide a rain shadow for much of the vines, protecting them from excessive rainfall. And finally, it's the soil. Much of the hilly soil is composed of clay and marl, which brings down the acidity of some of the grapes. Whereas in other parts of the region, the soil is heavy with sand, iron and limestone. Fog is very important here. It helps keep the grapes cool while it gradually burns off throughout the day. In fact, it's so important that the Nebbiolo grape, which is used to make Barolo and Barbaresco wine, is thought to be named after the Italian word for fog, nebbia. The Alps provide a rain shadow for much of the vines in Piemonte. This shadow protects them from heavy rainfall. In fact, it's so dry here that between the summer months of May through to September, the average number of days where it rains is just 25. That's 25 days out of 153. In London, over that same period of time, so from May to September, that figure is 81 days. So during the summer, it rains 3 times as much in London as it does in Piemonte. And it's this dryness that helps stop the vines from rotting and developing disease. Much of the soil is composed of clay and marl, which brings down the acidity of some of the grapes. This is particularly true of the regions where Barolo and Barbaresco are grown. The clay helps reduce the acidity of the Nebbiolo grape. So let's find out more about the key white grape varieties in Piemonte. Moscato Bianco. This is a very, very old grape with intense aromas and flavors that include rose, orange and lychee. It's the Moscato grape that goes into the region's most popular wine, the sparkling Asti, or Asti Frizzanti as they call it in Italy. Cortese. These grapes have a gentle acidity and a light citrusy aroma, as well as fruity notes like apricot and banana. It's the Cortese grapes that go into wines called Gavi or Gavi de Gavi. Arnese. Arnese means little rascal in Italian because it can be so difficult to grow. Despite the name, its flavors are actually very soft and often include ripe pear, apricot and hazelnut. In fact, the Arnese grapes are so mild, they're sometimes used to soften the tannins of the red Nebbiolo grape that goes into Barolo wine. So what about the red grape varieties? Let's start with Nebbiolo, which makes Barolo wine, the most highly regarded wine in all of Piemonte. Nebbiolo sounds like nebbia, which means fog in Italian, and is called this because of the whitish coating that covers the grapes. The Nebbiolo grapes are high in tannins and often have notes of cherry and fig. Next we have the Barbera grape, which is a thin-skinned grape and the most widely planted in all of Piemonte. Barbera is known for its low tannins, herbal notes and cherry aromas. And finally, we have the Dolcetto grape. Dolcetto means a little sweet in Italian, yet it's not very sweet and it doesn't produce sweet wines. In fact, the wines made from Dolcetto grape are usually dry and often have cherry and prune flavors. Some of the main wine-growing regions, or appellations as they're called in the industry, are Barolo, Barbaresco, Moscato d'Asti and Cortese di Gavi. Barolo, where the region's most famous wines come from. Winemains here are produced using the Nebbiolo grape and are often described as the finest in all of Italy. Yet, believe it or not, there was a time when producers gave Barolo wine away for free. In the 1970s, Barolo had become so unpopular that winemakers would give it away with a bottle of something else. This all changed in the 80s, when modern winemaking techniques were introduced alongside the traditional winemaking style, and Barolo was saved. During this turbulent period, during the 70s and the 80s, there was so much controversy over how to make wine that it's been dubbed the Barolo Wars. Wines produced in Barbaresco are also made from the Nebbiolo grape, and Barbaresco is very close to the Barolo region. However, the wines produced here are different for a few reasons, but the main reason is the soil. The soil is richer in lime here, so has a higher pH, meaning it's more alkaline. And this more alkaline soil produces less tannic wine. Moscato d'Asti. The sweet Moscato Bianco grape is grown here, which makes sparkling or frizzante dessert wines. Originally, these wines were made for the producers to enjoy only. That's why they're low in alcohol and so easy to drink. They were designed to be drunk at lunchtime. Cortese di Gavi. Often known simply as Gavi, this region is where the Cortese grapes are grown and Gavi wines are produced. Winemaking is very, very old here, and the current style of production dates back to the late 19th century. So what do we now know about Piemonte's wines? Well, Piemonte is a very mountainous and foggy region, which is fundamental to the production of its wines. The most popular wine made in Piemonte is Asti, and every year enough Asti is produced to fill 24 Olympic-sized swimming pools. During the 1970s, Barolo was given away for free because it was so undrinkable. But now it's so popular, it's considered one of the great red wines, like Burgundy and Bordeaux. And finally, protests against the taxation of Piemonte's wines led to revolts against the Austrian Empire, which helped spark a revolution that led to the unification of Italy.